My name is James Russwurm. I'm with UFCW 401 out of Edmonton. I'm representing a group of video game testers that unionized last year in April.
Hell yeah. Well, James, thank you so much for sitting down and chatting with us at the Real News Network. We are, of course, here in Montreal at the 30th Constitutional Convention of the Canadian Labour Congress. And, the Real News is here to talk to as many folks as we can, learn as much as we can about what workers like yourself are going through, struggles you're involved in, the state of the labor movement in Canada, and ultimately how we can support one another better across international lines, right? And I'm really excited to connect with you and talk about your guys' campaign, because you're the first, video game kind of like union to form in Canada, right?
That's correct, yes.
Man, yeah, so I want to talk all about that. And I want people to know where things kind of stand with that campaign and what they can do to support y'all. But before we get there, let's take a step back, because I love to kind of talk to folks about how they got into doing this work and what that work looks like, because I frankly have zero fucking clue of what video game developing, testing, like what the day-to-day of that job looks like.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about your path into that industry, and in so doing, just give us a sense of like what the day-to-day work in that industry looks like.
Absolutely. So to answer your first question of sort of how I got into it, I actually worked in a different capacity. I worked in hospitality and tourism prior to COVID. During COVID, I was laid off, as were so many other of my fellow employees. So I took it at the time. I always wanted to get into video games, development that way. So I went back to school. I went to the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology. And while I was there, I applied to work with Keyword Studios. And they got back to me and said, hey, are you interested in, taking this job? I said, yeah, that's great. What's the pay? It's minimum wage. And I went, okay, yeah, I'll still take it.
Was that a shock to hear?
I was hoping for a little bit more than that.
Oh.
I wasn't expecting them to go. So just so everyone knows, Alberta minimum wage is $15 an hour. So that is the bare minimum that they could pay us. So, but it's sort of a passion industry. You want to get that foot in the door. So I said, yeah, I'll take the job. Started working on it, and it was great. So I started there, and so what that looks like, it's not just like you're just coming in every day, just sitting down playing a video game and testing it. So
is that what most people think you do? Is just sit on a beanbag and just play Sonic the Hedgehog?
I don't even have a beanbag. I wish they'd give me a beanbag, but yeah. So we were actually working from home because it was the pandemic, and everybody was sort of working remotely. Then we had a meeting, I would say in April of last year, that sort of changed things. But the actual day-to-day work is a lot of coming in, someone will tell you, hey, go to this level, check out these things, write a report on it, send it back to us. We're going to write a report files and issues. We're going to get that back. So I did that for about a year. And then I was promoted up into a next level where I am now a quality analyst. And that kind of throws people for some loops because they don't really know what a quality analyst is. And what that is so instead of being the one that writes the test, that runs the test, you create the test. So you're creating the test for the workers to go do. They are, testing what you need to do, and then you relay that information back to the developers, and they make changes and stuff. So kind of like a middleman between the testers and the developers, but it's quite a technical job. It requires a lot of technical writing skills and a lot of know-how in sort of broader video games and how they work. So we wouldn't consider ourselves unskilled laborers because you pretty much need a post-secondary degree to even be considered for these types of positions. And we have people from all different types of backgrounds and degrees, everything from drama to technical design. So we really represent quite a broad selection of individuals all working as video game testers. So in, I believe it was February of last year, we got sort of called into a meeting with our managers from Keyword Studios that said, okay, starting next month, you're all going back to the office full time. That's just what's going to be happening. And we had been working for the last 3 years from home. There had been no issues regarding metrics or performance or anything like that. So it kind of took us as a bit of a surprise that there wouldn't be any leniency. There would be no hybrid. It was just, nope, back in the office 5 days a week. we're what's called embedded services. So we work directly in the offices of the studio, which is currently BioWare. Their employees were not required to come in every single day. They were offered fully remote, hybrid, whatever they wanted. So we sort of kind of scratched our heads a little bit at that and went, well, why are we being forced back into the office? And then for those of you who don't know, we're in Edmonton, and downtown parking in Edmonton, where our office is about $250 a month. When you're only making minimum wage,
Jesus, man.
Over the course of a year, it's almost 10% of your wage that you're just paying to parking and gas and car insurance, etc. So plus the additional 45 minutes on your day there and back. And that's if you're driving. If you're taking public transit, Edmonton public transit is pretty bad. So you're going to be at an even further disadvantage, and you're going to spend more time on the public transit. You're going to spend money on transit passes. Maybe it's over $100 a month for a transit pass in Edmonton. So we were all kind of going, can we afford to keep working here? If I've got to go back to the office, I'm already cutting it close. I'm saving costs because I'm at home. I don't have to commute. I can make my own food at home. I don't have to go out for lunch or, after work socials and all of these other things. And so we decided, okay, we're going to have a conversation. And I approached one of our, members and said, hey, how does this affect you? If we have to go back to the office, next month, 5 days a week, what does your life look like now? And, they were telling me, well, I, don't have a car, so I'm going to be spending over 2 hours a day on public transit, just going to and from work. And we're just like, there's got to be a better way. So I said, how about unionizing? Are you interested? And they went, what, what's a union? What does that do? What does that mean? And then that's sort of where I started. So I had previous experience with unions in the sense that my dad works for the Power Workers Union in Ontario for 30 years. And one of those industries, you work 30 years, you retire, you got a great pension, So I kind of understood the power of unions at the time. And it's been a topic in the video game industry for quite some time where people are saying, hey, you guys should unionize, because a lot of people don't know that it's quite an exploitative sector. Because we work in something that is a passion industry, like I said earlier, I'm willing to accept minimum wage for the experience and the opportunity and the exposure to get into that role. And we just sort of said, hey, we got to do something. There was some questions on who would be in the bargaining unit and who couldn't be. So what I started to do was just sort of reach out to our members just discreetly. So we're all remote. We're not in the office, so I couldn't just, grab somebody by the arm after work and say, hey, let's go get a beer. I got something to talk to you about. So I had to be a little bit more cryptic than that. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the application Discord. Yeah. So we had sort of a out-of-work social Discord that had a lot of our members on it. Yeah. And so I just started reaching out to them directly on that. A little cryptic at first, being like, hey, could I talk to you about something? I never reached
you
out.
Up?
Yeah. It kind of felt like that at times, right? We were just like, I don't want to say it's not serious, but when you got a minute, can we talk? And that's sort of how I started reaching out to our members sort of discreetly and building out a base. So there was about 22 of us, and there was some questions on who could be in the unit, because we did have supervisors and managers and things like that present. But we ended up getting about 17 union cards signed. And it was great because it was electronic. With COVID, one of the benefits that came out with it was you didn't have to go and sign a union card anymore and go all over the city and track people down. It was like, hey, here's a link and fill it out. And then what we did was we built a community within the Discords. We made a server, and then it was like, you sign a union card, you get an invite. So and then once you're in, then you can chat to everybody else who's already signed a union card and talk about workplace issues and talk about, what's bothering you, and sort of building this group up from the ground. And we reached out to everybody. Everybody got a chance to say yes or no. And then by the end, we had about 17 cards signed. So in much to some of our members' enjoyment, we submitted our application on April 20th, 420. Yeah.
On brand.
Yeah. So we submitted that, and then we sort of, took off from there. And that's sort of how I got my start and how we got the whole ball rolling with the unionization.
Wow. I mean, that's incredible, because those basic questions that you reached out and asked your coworkers, Because like you said, like going back to the office from work from home to transitioning to 5 days a week in the office, like that wasn't just like I don't get to wear sweatpants anymore, which is how like it's talked about in the mainstream media.
Right.
It's like, no, this is an immediate chunk of my take home pay that just is gone. And like, I don't know, like just, I'd really want to emphasize for people watching and listening to this that just taking that step to turn to your left, turn to your right, ask your coworkers, what is this going to mean for you? Like that is organizing. That is where it starts. And look where it grew from there, right? And I wanted to just kind of hover on the technical detail for a second.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, I talked to so many workers in the United States who are similarly trying to, you know, unionize their shops, whether they're Starbucks workers, Amazon workers, graduate students, nonprofit workers, so on and so forth. And as you probably know, the U.S. is not a very labor-friendly place.
Unfortunately.
So, like, when I talk to people outside of the U.S. about the, like, you know, Rube Goldberg system of rules and hurdles just to get to like a union election, most people's question is like, how does anyone get a union in the United States? And the sad fact is most don't. But I say all that to say that for us, the standard process is to, get people to sign union cards. If you get above 30% of the eligible bargaining unit members in your shop to sign cards, that triggers a National Labor Relations Board election. But it's a long drawn out process. You get a date for an election that's like usually a month or months away. In that time, that's when the boss can turn on the screws and hold captive audience meetings. The election process is like not easy to navigate. So there's a lot of shit put in people's way. I wanted to ask if it's the same or like,
bit. I'm from Alberta. We have a conservative government right now that just recently, in their last sort of like term, repealed sort of the majority card rule. Like if you had majority of the workers sign a card, you're just unionized.
Yeah.
So they got away with that. They just threw that out the last time they got elected. So we still had to have that like month process where we had pretty well everybody on the team had signed the card. And we had a few that were just like, I'm still uncomfortable with signing the card. I'll vote yes when the vote comes around, but like I don't want to be involved in like any of this organizing since it all goes bad. And, we respected those people and, we knew like we don't want to like pressure you or really lean on you, right? Like we respect your decision. We gave everybody the option to say yes or no. So we went in with a majority. I think we had like almost like 70% of the team had signed cards at that point. So we knew we were in a good spot for going through the vote. But we still had our employer try to claim people who didn't even work with us in the province to sort of like dilute that pool, right? Because if they think, maybe they just hit the minimum threshold for cards, we'll throw some more people in there. Oh, now you don't have that many people anymore. Too bad, right? It turned out to be a little bit funny because when we still passed the review, they're like, they got more than enough cards. Suddenly those people are no longer part of that bargaining unit. Like, we don't want you to represent those people, kind of stuff. So we were like, okay, well, we have the cards. So what happens next? We had some executives fly into Edmonton. Never before have we seen anybody from any other regional office or anything like that come into Edmonton. They booked like a hotel conference room and said, hey, we're going to be here for 2 days. Come by, tell us what your problems are. We'd love to help you solve them. I don't think anybody went. And I think that sent a pretty clear message to them as well. And so after that, I think that kind of died off a bit. We didn't really get any captive audience meetings. I think that like a lot of people get. It also helps that we're remote, right? We're all in our different homes, so they can't come into work and ambush us and be like, hey, we're all having a meeting in the office right now. Send us a Zoom link and then, whatever, just minimize it, go do something else while they talk about anti-union stuff or whatever. But I never had that happen. And then eventually we got to the vote. And the vote was, it was also virtual. So we had signed our mail-in ballots. So we had all received them at our home, mail them back in. They all go back to the labor board. Then the labor board counts them. And I was watching it on Zoom because there was me and another member from UFCW there, and then of course a representative, their lawyer from Keyword Studios, and she opened them all and went through them all. And I'm like, oh, is she just checking to see like that they're all there? And then she's going to do a count. And once she was done with them all, and she was like, unanimous. Is it unanimous? Yes. And I just was like, yes. Like,
do like the slow motion, like pump.
Yeah, that sends a good message, right? Yeah. So I was super proud of our team there to just come together unanimously, because we didn't want to be in a position where we had a portion of people who didn't feel like this union was for them or it wasn't the right fit. So just the team sending that signal to us as the organizers and to the union, UFCW, and to our employer, right? That sort of resounding message, hey, we're ready to go, we're ready to fight on this. And then that sort of, after that vote, we started getting into contract negotiations, which, we're still in today. We're working on our first contract, and it's slow going, but we are talking about a lot of things that don't exist in other union contracts. We're talking about work from home. That is something that we want enshrined in our contract. That's sort of like, hey, if our workers don't have a demonstrable need to be at the office, they should not be required to be there. Mm-hmm. And if you do require them to be there, then you got to like give them some sort of stipend, a monthly allowance or something like that for parking, for fuel costs, et cetera, et cetera. So that was one of the big sort of factors that we wanted to do. And funny enough, we kind of already got it, because after the submission to the labor union, they have what's called a freeze, right? Like he can't change working conditions on the workers anymore, which means can't send us back to the office. So that would be changing our working conditions. So our members have actually been able to continue working from home for the last year, and we've, in some cases, saved people about $3,000 a year in parking and fuel and things like that. So it's been nice that we've been able to sort of already enact some of those changes that we were going for, which is one of the big ones being work from home. We kind of already have it right now, and then when we get it enshrined in our contract, then it'll all be official. And the other thing is obviously wages, because we get paid minimum wage if you're sort of like a starter, just game tester, which is about $15 an hour. The average price, I think, about a one bedroom in Edmonton right now is $1,200 a month. So we have people who are, spending almost 50% of their paycheck just to go to rent, right? We've got members who can't move out of their parents' place because they can't afford a place on their own. So we're really trying to get those wages up to at least like a living wage for Edmonton, which is about, I believe right now is $22.50. But I don't know what way inflation's going. Maybe that changed since like last week. So it's just our way of battling back against these high prices and these inflationary environment, right? It's all we can do.
Well, that's like, without a doubt, the biggest common thread that I'm hearing from workers across industries, not just here in Canada, but in the US, the United Kingdom, France, all over the world, we are in the midst of a really intense cost of living crisis, right?
Absolutely.
Even just the phrasing of that always creeps me out. But it's been this really big equalizing factor that I feel has brought folks in from industries that may have in the past seen themselves as separate from your standard blue-collar worker, right? You're seeing more nonprofit workers, folks in tech, right? Not just you all in Edmonton, but down in the States, we've had, really critical union drives and labor actions in tech, at Google, Apple, Microsoft, Activision, right? So something's really happening here, and what I'm hearing from more and more folks is cost of living is a big one.
Yep.
Right? It's regardless of the industry that we're in, there are of course some exceptions, but by and large, people are noticing the same trend that we're working longer, we're working harder, and yet it is taking more and more to make ends meet with rent, with groceries, gas and electric bills, so on and so forth. So it really does feel like we're all taking in water, and people are turning more to unions, collective action, worker mobilization, right, to fight for what working people deserve. And I think that's really, really exciting to see. And I kind of wanted to ask in that vein, if that was a difficult part of the process for you, was to like get folks to see themselves as, you know, workers who should unionize in the first place, right? Or did y'all see yourselves as part of this groundswell that we're seeing in tech or even beyond with the increase in unionizations, the strikes? Was that
a little bit actually. Like the way we look at it is, you know, we're all workers, right? Like if you go to work for your money and you got to work, you're a worker, right? It doesn't matter if you work in video games. It doesn't matter if you're a plumber, right? Like we work for our dinner. We all do. So there's no sense in us being like, oh, well, you know, we're above this, or, you know, we don't need collective action because we're treated so well, because the reality is we're not. The video games industry is highly exploitative across not even just for testers, even developers. I don't know if you've heard the phrase crunch before, but what that essentially is when you're working on a project and you're getting near the end and you're going, okay, we have this release date that we can't really move because we've shipping our products to vendors and, you know, they're going to put it on their shelves and it's going to be ready to go, but there's all this work left. So we're just going to do like 80-hour weeks until that happens. And there's been projects that our members have worked on where that has lasted for 6 months. Like just unrelenting overtime, no breaks. Like people sleeping under their desks, like, is not uncommon in this sphere, right? And the industry's trying to change that culture a lot, especially from the studio levels. They're trying to get away from that, better planning, delaying games, you know, that kind of stuff. But the reality is, for a long time, and still even to this day, that is what's happening, right? These people are being exploited because they love what they do, and it's really hard to watch. And that was, you know, part of the reason that I really wanted to get a feel for how the team was feeling. Because coming into this, when I was starting, I didn't really have any experience in video games, but the people on my team had been around the block and they had seen a lot, and they could sort of see it a bit into the future of where we could be heading and wanting to protect ourselves against that, right? So either, like, we're in our contracts, overtime is a really big thing that we're talking about, right? Because generally that's been the safety net for the studios is, oh shit, well, if we can't make our deadlines, we'll just, you know, grind our workforce until it's done. And it's not healthy. People burn out, you know, it's terrible for mental health. And that's sort of what we want to protect ourselves from is those sort of exploitative measures. And so, yeah, we absolutely feel like we're in line with all the other labor, because that's what happens to like almost everybody, right? Grocery store workers are getting, you know, hosed this pandemic with their hero pay, and then that was taken away. Like, we were lucky that we weren't out on the front lines during COVID, but, you know, we 100% support everybody who was, and we want to make sure that we can make all labor better for everybody, regardless of what sector you're in.
Well, like, the hero pay is the perfect example. It's the one that I always go back to, because it makes the case to any worker out there, even if you are in an industry where you feel like you got it better than, you know, a farm worker or a service worker or something like that. A boss's promise is temporary. A union contract is in writing, right? Because we saw that in the States, like Amazon, right? Got all this publicity in the early days of the pandemic when it offered hero pay, not hazard pay, because if you call it hazard pay, then you have to keep paying as long as the hazard persists. But when you call it hero pay, it just seems like something that you're giving out of the benevolence of your own heart, right?
Right.
Very calculated little shits there. So, like,
they can be creative.
but it does really make the case that if we have like an inflation crisis, or, you know, we're in the kind of like circumstances that we're in now, a lot of those promises, the working conditions, the pay, you know, they can go away. They can be changed out on a whim.
Absolutely.
And passed down unilaterally. And if workers don't have a union, a collective voice on the job, it's like, what do we do? What do we say in that regard? So it really is in everyone's interest to have that organization in their workplace, even if you like your job. Yeah. Right? Which is like another thing that I've heard from y'all is like, we don't want to leave and just like find something else. Like, there is a lot we've invested in this, but we should be paid a living freaking wage.
Yeah, right? Like, and we just you want to be able to pay your bills at the end of the day. And that's any worker, I feel, that works, a full-time normal job should be able to do that. And our members can't right now, right? Because of the pay. And I think it was, I don't want to say easy because organizing is not easy. It can be difficult at times, but it's necessary. And if you feel that way about your workplace, if you're saying, you look to the people to your left and right, they're being exploited, or you feel like you're being exploited, just talking to your fellow workers and saying, hey, this decision that just happened, how does that affect you? How does that make you feel? Right? I never knew how far that would take me to being able to organize, right? And I think that's really like the message that we want to put out there is, it's work, but it's worth it. Because at the end of the day, what we have now is more than we had even before we unionized. And we don't have a contract yet. We have legal protections that are protecting us from, just them firing us all, right? It's a lot harder to do those types of things once you have union recognition, and then the contract comes afterwards, and then whatever you can agree on. And it was an easy sell for a lot of our people because there's not a lot of guarantees in the games industry for working, especially us as contractors, right? You may work on a title, and then at the end of that title, they say, well, we don't need any testers anymore. You'll lay off and you can all go on EI or whatever, right? And next time that there's a project, we can, you can apply and maybe you get the job, right? Mm-hmm. And sort of the carrot that they dangle in front of you is these studios, right? They say, hey, if you do a really good job on this, the studio is going to want to pick you up and hire you. And there is some truth to that, but the reality is, say you have 60 people, maybe 2 of those people are going to the studio, right? And it also creates this sort of intercompetitiveness of people like trying to stand out and one-upmanship that we really want to get away from, right? Because what my conversation was to them is that, well, what if instead of that, we could get recall legislation into our union contract that says, hey, if you worked on this project, if there's another one coming up, they got to hire based on seniority. And that's something else that we're talking about with our employer as well, right? Because right now there is no guarantee that when you're done a project, you'll ever work in games like this again, right? There was a manager that just didn't like you and you're just never going to make it past the interview phase. We wanted to make sure that it's fair and that, based on how much time you've put in, you can come back and then you can, continue your work, which is more of a guarantee than we ever had before.
Hell yeah. Well, James, I want to thank you for sitting down and chatting with us. I want to thank Action Network for letting us use their booth. And I wanted to just end on a final question. Where do things stand now with the Fight for the First contract? And more importantly, what can folks watching and listening to this do to stand in solidarity with y'all?
Well, to answer your first question, sort of where we are today, we're still in the midst of negotiations. Actually, I'm doing some virtual negotiations Wednesday, Thursday with my employer. And then we're still building out the contract, but we're hopefully going to be done by the end of the summer is sort of our goal. And we've seen movement from the management side as well as sort of let's get this wrapped up. We want to finish this because they've been at it a long time too. They got to fly to Edmonton from like Ireland anytime they come to negotiate with us, right? So that we're hoping that in the next couple of months we'll be able to come out and be like, hey, this is our contract, this is what we got, and sort of be an example for anybody else who wants to follow afterwards. And so what I can say to people who are maybe out there listening to this, what they can do to support us, hey, if you work in video games, find a way to reach out to us. You can probably find us through a lot of ways. We'd be happy to talk to you, share our stories and help them. But also, if people could change the perspective a little bit on what we do is we don't, we came up against this a lot, especially when the story broke. People say, oh, those video game testers, and you sit around and play games all day, right? Remember that we're workers just like everybody else, and we're just trying to get a fair deal. It just like all we're asking for is a living wage, right? Mm-hmm. And share that knowledge with other people. So when maybe you hear about another games worker who's down and my job is killing me, say, hey, look at these people. Have you considered unionization? Because so far it's worked well for them. And that's what I'd like.
Thank you so much for watching The Real News Network, where we lift up the voices, stories, and struggles that you care about most. And we need your help to keep doing this work, so please tap your screen now, subscribe, and donate to The Real News Network. Solidarity forever.